Meditations from the Wisdom Tradition, a conversation circle with this week's theme being planting seeds. And I'd just like to start off with the quote of the week by Robert Louis Stevenson. It says, "Don't judge each day by the harvest you reap, but by the seeds that you plant." And I think that's a wonderful kickoff to our conversation. We're so thrilled to have Peter, who is one of the co-founders of the Mauna Farm on Oahu. It's one of the largest woofing farms in the US at the moment. And Peter is graciously going to talk from the agricultural tradition and, more importantly, focus on Vandana Shiva. So Peter, I will hand it over to you. Thank you so much.
Well, aloha all. It's a pleasure and an honor to be able to say some words.
Aloha, Peter.
I'm going to start with a quote from Vandana Shiva. I assume you all know who she is, but if you don't, she is a progressive intellectual agricultural revolutionary from North India, very engaged in the conversations about sustainability and ecology and human soul and human spirit, finding unity in all. And she had the following quote: "The seed in its essence is all of the past evolution of the earth, the evolution of human history, and the potential for future evolution. The seed is the embodiment of culture, because culture shaped the seed with careful selection. Women picked the best, diversified. So from one grass, you got 200,000 rices. That is a convergence of human intelligence and nature's intelligence. It is the ultimate expression of life. And in our language, it means that from which life arises on its own forever and ever and ever. No matter what problem you look at, every ecological problem comes from this illusion that we are separate from nature. I believe overcoming the separation is a longing much deeper than the recent rise of ecological awareness. The healing comes from reclaiming the oneness with the web of life, with the universe itself. Some people do it through meditation and yoga, but a lot more are doing it just by planting a seed and growing a garden. In planting a seed, you are one with the cycles and regenerative capacity of life. We hear the same thing again and again from children we work with, sowing gardens of hope with seeds of freedom. When you ask, so what did you learn? They always talk about the miracle of life, that a tiny seed bursts into a plant and gives an abundance, and they can harvest a seed from it. The seed sown in the soil makes us one with the earth. It makes us realize that we are the earth, that this body of ours is the Panchabhuta, excuse my mispronunciation, the 5 elements that make the universe and make our bodies. The simple act of sowing a seed, saving a seed, planting a seed, harvesting a crop for a seed is bringing back this memory, this timeless memory of our oneness with the earth and the creative universe. There's nothing that gives me deeper joy than the work of protecting the diversity and the freedom of the seed. Everything I was thinking of saying is embodied in this. But I have a few other things to add. From the agricultural perspective, agriculture is the wisdom of our ages. And when you hold a handful of seeds, all the seeds that you want to grow, they are so varied and so beautiful, and yet so fragile. And if we look at all the seeds that we grow, they are a fraction of the potential. And it's important to recognize that those 200,000 rices that we created are not there anymore. In the modern world, we have, in our efforts to control versus cooperate with nature, we have reduced the number of seeds that are available. And we have to think about that because it is the wisdom of our ages. we have to think about that. I'm a more practical guy, so I sometimes get lost in ideology, because I think of, in one generation, 2 generations, now 5 or 6 generations, we have lost the wisdom of the ages of that seed. And it's not just the seed. And I think what's really important to recognize is that seeding in agriculture is just the beginning. It's not even the beginning, because you have to prepare for the seed. You know, when you plant that seed, it's like a child. It's fragile. It needs that light, just the right amount. It needs the water, just the right amount. It can't be planted too deep. It can't be planted too shallowly. Every seed has its own requirement. And when you look back at the farmers of 1,000 years ago, even 500 years ago, even 200 years ago in some places, that knowledge was passed on from generation to generation. And not just about the seeding, but about the entire life process of those seeds. How and when to water, fertilize, which ones to plant to take care of different alternatives. And you know, you look at rice, out of 200,000, maybe we grow 40 in the world now. What I always want to make sure that we all think about is it's work. You can't just plant a seed and watch it grow. We have to put the work in, whether we're putting that work into our own seed. We have to work through our yoga, our meditation, our therapy, our issues that we have to overcome to make us all more connected. And agriculture is the same. You know, for all the seeds that we plant, there's 1,000 other seeds in nature wanting that same space. And we're all invasive. You know, if we look at Hawaii, we're all invasive species. And invasive really just means we didn't start there. And so it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. But there's always that sense of, and I'm not going to say competition, but there's always a desire for life in all of those seeds and all of that soil. So agriculture really is that balance of control and surrender. Because we can't control. You'll never control it. Like Vandana Shiva says, to be successful, we have to be connected to ourselves. We have to be connected to the soil. We have to be connected to the people. We have to be connected to the valley, the air, the sun, the rain. Everything is there. The only thing that separates us, I say this to my woofers a lot, the only thing that separates us from each other in the land is our perception of separation. And so it is that wisdom of the ages that we all have to keep planting those seeds. And seeding isn't just about agriculture. Planting the seeds is the seeds of the future. It's the seeds of the minds, the hearts, and the souls of the future. Because, you know, as we're all getting older, I can't see any other faces there, but I imagine we're all in the older range, or most of us. We have to share that wisdom. We have to plant the seeds and the crops that we are, the seeds that we have become. We have to plant those into the next generation, and the next generation after that, and the next generation after that. And given the damage that we've created, the urgency is much greater in some level. And in some other level, it is what it is. And we do the best we can. But, you know, I have a lot of woofers on the farm, and they're young people who come, and it's really a foundation of what we do now. And that is, how do we plant seeds in these young people who have never been on a farm, never worked for the most part in their life, to find inspiration in nature, find inspiration in that connection, find inspiration in each other, because they're all a critical part of the dance. We have to do that, you know. I guess the only thing, I haven't been timing myself, so I don't know where I am, but when we work, we have to continue to work with love, trust, not fear, not too much order or control. We have to, nature is so beautiful because it's chaos thriving. And we humans have this tendency to want to put order and control in boxes and order and charts and all, but really nature doesn't work that way. So really the challenge is, how do we learn to dance with nature, in ourselves, in our soil, in our seeds, with our companions? And you do it with love, you do it with generosity, and you do that by sharing. There really is nothing more to it. If we could all give with love, give with generosity, and share, how could there possibly be a problem in the world with humanity? Besides the usual stuff. That's all I have to say, really. I can talk about agriculture all you want, but planting seeds is just the beginning of the work that we all do, and we have to do all our life. I think that what I bring about with our young kids is, we don't have a choice to work. The beggar has to work their whole life. It's not easy. So any seed that we plant has to be cultivated, has to be cared for, has to be harvested, has to be shared, cooked, eaten, and started over again. There's never a process of pure reflection other than every breath should be our reflection. Every breath should be our meditation. Every step is our asana, right? That's what I was talking about too, is, when we think about yoga, farming is yoga. Every step you make is an asana and our connection to nature. And how do we continue to be more aware of that as we plant these seeds in ourselves? Because if we can't plant those seeds in ourselves, we can't really help anybody else or anything else. Truly, it has to come from our own hearts first. Do that first. So that's all I have to say to start. I'm open to any other comments or questions.
Of course. Thank you so much, Peter. That was wonderful. And I think, David, you would like to start us off?
Oh, I'd love to. I just want to say thank you so much, Peter, for that offering. And one thing, well, many things that you said were stimulating for me. I was curious why you were avoiding the use of the word competition.
Well, I'm gonna start out by saying that one thing I tell our kids is, I think that capitalism isn't a theory. I think capitalism is a reality. I think every single one of us in humanity and in nature is doing everything they can to better themselves. And that the point in humanity where it becomes an issue is when we're bettering ourselves at the expense of somebody else. But in the plant world, it is competition. It is who gets there, who grows the first, the fastest, the best. And that's where it is a balance. In agriculture, it is a balance of control. To me, it's not all competition, because I've given up trying to compete with all of the weeds on the farm. I'll lose. It's a matter of finding balance and how we go about it. Sometimes what Surya and I talk about it is, sometimes it's better to let the weeds grow a little longer. It actually helps the vegetable crops establish themselves. So it's all about timing. And I don't know if I was carefully avoiding it, but I'm trying to avoid, competition is a state of reality. And we try to do it in a way that is non-hurtful. And it doesn't always work, of course, but it's a good question. I'm not sure I could, it is a truth that in the natural world, every creature competes for their space.
Yeah.
And that's that's a reality that I think we have to accept. But we as humans, I guess I avoided it because we as humans get the choice to decide what is competition and what is actually collaboration. And I think that collaboration in almost all cases in humanity tends to have better outcomes in the long run. So I like to focus on collaboration and in dancing with each other in nature as opposed to competing with each other, because it isn't about who's better or who's best. It's about ensuring the best outcome for everybody or everything.
Oh, yeah, good. I thought something along those lines might have been what was there. So there's a kind of a dark side to competition, but think about.
As a judge, I think we have to be careful of our judgments. I know, I think that we're all very quick in our cultural upbringings to be judgmental. And I guess that's why I avoided it too, is that, competition is not necessarily a dark thing because it all makes us all better. When we're breeding seeds, I guess we're setting plants to compete to who's going to have the best outcome for what it is. And I guess one thing I was going to say about plants in general and breeding, which is interesting, is that the way that the modern world breeds seeds today is actually in a counterintuitive and a counterproductive way to be in collaboration with nature. We are breeding seeds strictly to be able to control fields and kill everything else around it. And that's a scary thing. And that, 80% of the world's seed is controlled by biotech companies and pharmaceutical and fertilizer agricultural supply companies. And the future of seed is actually in a very scary place right now. Seed banks are not well maintained, they're not funded, and those that are privately held and not accessible. So there's some scary thoughts out there, and there's a lot of little networks out there. And why at our farm we only buy organic seed from, B Corp employee-owned companies, just to help support that effort.
It's a pleasure to meet you, and
Thank you.
I hope you'll be telling us quite a bit more about your farm. In the meantime, just because of this conversation about competition, I don't know if you know, I'm an evolution biologist and futurist, tracking humanity's path at present. And I came up with a maturation curve in nature all through evolution. There's a youthful phase, which can be very competitive and very creative. And then there's a more mature or a mature phase in which the adolescent crisis is somehow overcome, and we expect our feisty teenagers to settle down and be good, cooperative, peaceful citizens, right? And we've learned more recently, that we are one of the only 6 really social species ever to evolve, the 4 insect ones that we all know about, and oddly enough, only 2 in mammals, and one of them is blind mole rats, whom we know very little about because they're underground in their colonies of millions of cooperative citizens, and humans. So we are destined to be cooperative social creatures, because you can't be a social creature without lots of cooperation going on, right? But the point is that both the youthful phase and the mature phase are necessary in nature. And when you're planting seeds, unless you've got a very well-established farm where all the seeds know what they're doing already, you will have a certain amount of going through that youthful phase. And even for us in the most cooperative phase, the Olympics in Greece were designed as competitive games for the purpose of driving excellence.
Right.
So it's not about when I win, you lose. And I after I learned that, I wanted to go to schools and say, could we talk to the parents in the bleachers one night about the game without having said anything to the coach or the players on either team? we're going to tell the parents tonight we're all going to cheer excellence, which means you're going to cheer for every score made, no matter which team makes it. And I learned this in China. I was actually there at a basketball game where my host kept doing this. He leaped up and cheered and I said to the interpreter, "Which team is yours?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, well, which team do you want to win? He said, "How do I know which one will win?" And so eventually he described to me that we see this as competition is there to drive excellence, and we want the excellence to succeed as inspiration for the future. So if you told the parents we're going to do this, and then at the end of the game, you say the team with the most points has to give a party for the team with fewer points to thank them for driving them to the extra excellence. And you see, everything would shift in the kids see these things.
Yeah.
So there are those different ways of seeing competition, and there is a maturation cycle. So
That's really cool. I have a lot of conversations with my son about the nature of games, and how in our American culture, games are always about winning and losing, as opposed to being best. And that's really great. I'd love it. I'd love to get some references to your work so I can read it and share it with my son, who's entering a PhD program in environmental sciences. So I'd love to be able to share some of your work with him.
I'll gladly do that before we're done, but let me just say Vandana Shiva is a very old friend of mine, and I haven't seen her since the Paris COP, but I was there with her and with Marina Silva, who used to be the Minister of the Environment in Brazil when Lula was first president, and is back now. So I have a photo of me and Vandana and Marina Silva in Paris at that conference. So I first ran into Vandana's work in the 1980s, I guess, when she first published The Violence of the Green Revolution. And that book was very seminal in my own development, because she explained so clearly why the Green Revolution was bad for the world, and how much land and agriculture was destroyed by it, and how they, in the name of making gardens, they actually produced deserts. And this was, of course, big agriculture taking over food production in the world at the end of World War II, when they had nothing to do with the nitrates they'd been using to make explosives for the war, and discovered that they could use them as artificial fertilizer, right? So some of the people, I know you know this history, but some of the rest of us perhaps aren't aware of how much wonderful work and for how long she's been doing it.
Well, when I was studying agriculture in Sri Lanka in 1983, where I met Surya, my project was to study the transition in the agriculture in Sri Lanka from traditional agriculture to green revolution agriculture. And I was supposed to write a paper on it, but it was way over my head at 21 to be able to put it all together. But I've been thinking about it and recognizing it ever since, of how fundamental, not just, industrial changes. It started back in colonialism. It started back in the despots of the Mesopotamia Valley and the Nile River Valley. It goes way back in the exploitation of land and soil and people. And it's easy to blame modern culture, but I think we can look at humanity back for a long, long time at that. But
we've always
what was amazing about Sri Lanka was just that how much was lost in such a short number of generations. I mean, there's a book called 40 Centuries of Farming about the sustainability of Chinese rice farming, which was one of my textbooks in 1983. It was a phenomenal, discussion of what regenerative agriculture really entailed. And Sri Lanka, in 900 AD, Sri Lanka was exporting 70% of its rice to India. In 1980, it was importing 80% of its rice from wherever it could get it, because the British ruined the tank system. The HYV, high yielding variety rices, were being controlled by the rice board, and everybody had to plant it, and everything fell apart. It was horrible. But I mean, that's way oversimplified, but yeah.
Did you also meet Dr. Ari there, the Sarvodaya movement?
No, I didn't. I studied under a guy named Renée Tillotson, whose grandfather was the first prime minister and uncle was the third prime minister, and he was the first PhD ecologist in Sri Lanka. And he has all sorts of amazing projects in analog forest, recreating the forest garden. He did studies of, tracking the deliberate farming gardens of farmers who'd been there for centuries. And 1/2 hectare of land will have 500 species, and each one of them was intentionally placed there. And they span from 5 generations of a teak tree to, the herbs and spices of the week. It's really amazing stuff.
Did you later learn about the Sarvodaya movement?
Well, his father was one of the founders of the Sarvodaya movement, and they had a disagreement with, I'm afraid I forgot the other fellow's name who kept it on, but they started it together and they split. And the Sarvodaya movement had some. There are a number of people in Sri Lanka who had a number of big issues with it, who are in the progressive movement, and I'm afraid I can't remember what they were, so I can't speak to it.
Well, off our.
It was very political too.
We can talk
He
about
would
that some
always
other
get in the
time.
way.
Okay, so David, once again, and then I have a follow-up question about a little bit about farming and the role others have. So David first.
Kevin, you go ahead. Go ahead. I was curious about how we tie this into our theme of citizens of the future. So why don't you go ahead?
Sure. So yes, this year, the Still and Moving Center theme for the whole year is citizens of the future, and how we
Beautiful.
our inward eye, and just all of these things, keeping the spark of enthusiasm. So you mentioned a lot about the planter and the care and everything that the planter has to provide to make a yield successful for the year. But I'm wondering, does anyone want to speak, in the process of pollination, or is it germination? What is the correct term?
Well, we all need bees for pollination to make the seeds. Germination is what makes the seeds come up, and that's the art of farming and gardening, is how to do that. And the only way to do that is to get engaged with it and learn about it through your experience. That's what's gratifying about having all these young people on the farm, is having them all learn how to plant, how to set up a bed, how to plant a bed, how to germinate a bed, how to water the bed, how to weed the bed. Because in the end, that's what everybody has to learn that. And we got to get it into the school kids, bringing these programs. And COVID kind of tripped us up out at the farm, and we're still kind of redesigning it, but we're about to start bringing in a bunch of classes out to the farm, where our farm is a 3-legged stool, the way I describe it. We have the farm, which is agricultural knowledge. It is connecting to the earth. It is connecting to the seed. It is learning what it means to say that you are what you eat. It's about the planting. It's about the weeding. It's about the harvesting. It's about the cooking. It's about the celebration of the harvest and eating it together. That's one part of our farm. The next part of our farm, and that's all of these are teaching. Everything has to have people and younger people engaged in this process, because the other part of it is that creative process. We all have to be creative in our minds, and that's why we have the artist village out at the farm, is having and it's really the core, is spark the mind and spark the creative aspect, just to think, to feel, to be yourself. And through that, everything else will unfold as it will. And the third part is Mauna. Mauna is inner silence in Sanskrit. It's until you find silence, you won't be able to listen. And until you learn to listen, you won't be able to be connected. And so seek that silence, seek that listening, seek that connection, or be open to it. Don't seek it, let it come. And And all three of those together to me are that chain of what we learn, how we collaborate, how we inspire each other on all these fronts. It is, you can't separate ourselves from our land, from our creative spirit. Just like we can't separate ourselves from each other. And the more we can integrate that thought of our connectedness is so critical, I think, to all of our future.
And I just wonder what some of the other participants think. You know, I'm sure all of us at one time or another have done either a little box garden or planted a tree or something like that. And many of you may know from experience, or who don't have a green thumb, so to speak, you may not have had all the seeds bloom. So you think about it, you put this seed in this dark hole, and some of them come up, you know, with water, air, and sunlight. But then you have others that don't necessarily bud or, you know, take fruit. But nevertheless, I think the mindset should be, it's not about the yield, it's about the quality. And I think that if humans kind of utilize that thought process and say, well, I reached out to this old friend and they never got back to me, or I did something good and then I got a flat tire. So how important, and this is for everybody in the group, how important do you feel it is to continue that outlook of, I'm not worried about how big or what fruit the plant produces, but at least putting it out there so that we try to grow ourselves and move toward a life of our values by our actions as human beings. Does anybody have a thought on that?
Well, what I like to say is that no matter who you are, that anytime you're going to plant, you should always plant. And to connect yourself, you have a little meditation, have a prayer, have a blessing. Bless the soil, bless the seed, bless the transplant. Put the seed in your hand and feel it. Connect yourself to it. Put your hand on the tree as you're planting it, or the bulb, or whatever it is. Connect yourself to it. Say a prayer, give a blessing, put some flowers on it, light some incense. Feel yourself connecting to it, because energy is energy. It doesn't dissipate, it emanates. Keep doing it every day.
I like that, every day. Carol Ann, were you going to say something?
So I was just thinking that two things. I have probably 30 house plants. I look at growing things as a sign of good mental health, because it means that I'm present, I'm remembering to take care of them. And I kind of can think back to a period in my life where I couldn't have done those things. And it actually began with a woman giving me the clipping off of a spider plant and it being in water. And I just had to remember to keep giving it water until it started to grow roots. Easy enough. So every day I just would check and I just would keep watering her. She's a her now. Her name's Henrietta. And Henrietta started to grow more. The more I just kept her in the sun, and then eventually I decided to put her in some dirt. And now Henrietta's been in my apartment for a couple of years, and it just started with being present enough in myself emotionally to remember to take care of something outside of me. And it became a labor of love. It turned into many other house plants that I have. And you guys know that I have my service dog that I obviously feed and water now too. And the last thing I wanted to add is I was in the little hardware store by my house, and I was thinking about Renee today, and I picked up Renee's Garden fairy garden mix. I obviously can't send it to her in Honolulu because I don't think it can import, but it was just,
We can buy Renee seeds here in Honolulu.
there we go. So
We'll make sure she gets some packets.
So I just, it for me, when you're thinking about cultivating awareness, it really, when people are not in touch with themselves emotionally, it's hard for them to be like, yeah, I'm going to light an incense and I'm going to plant a seed today and hopefully something will happen. When they can actually see something physically, tangibly occurring, like the roots growing because you have it hydroponically just there in a jar in your window, it was kind of cool. Like I could see something start to occur and it became this tangible thing and the seed grew. And now when I look around my apartment, like I said, I have quite a few plants, but I have all kinds everywhere.
That's
There's
lovely.
there's not one crevice I did not stick a little guy in somewhere. So
Congratulations.
I owed to seeds. Thank you for bringing this topic to us, by the way. It's been just really lovely.
Thank you, Carol Ann. David.
Yeah, and this may be directed a little more to Elizabeth. But Kevin, you hit the magic word that I had written down early on, which was germination. Now I know you mentioned also pollination, and I know that every phase is necessary. It's a cycle of life, right? But I was thinking that the germination phase is a very delicate phase, and it may have something to do with what Elizabeth was talking about in the younger stage. And so I just wondered, Elizabeth, if you had any comments about this idea of germination and sort of the extraction in terms of what we like to do here in GEMS is extract these as more as a metaphor and lessons towards life as a form of wisdom. And what can we learn about life itself from the germination cycle of growth? This is, of course, to everyone, but
well, of course, the germination part is the baby part, right? And the baby part needs extra care. It has to be monitored more closely and more carefully, and fed the right things and all that in order to get to the child and adolescent stages. So I'm sure Peter has more to say about that. And I'd love to hear more in general, Peter, about what is the input to your farm? What is the output of your farm? I know you have woofers. I assume you also have Hawaiian kids working on the farm. So
We
tell us
have
more.
some Hawaiian kids, not as many as we'd like. We'll get that more as we come back into the school system, and we're developing some joint sort of farm ceramic programs for after school and in school. Our inputs are a lot of hands, many hands. We say every day.
A lot of what?
Hands.
Oh,
There's only so much you can do with one hand, but with two hands, you can do a lot more. With 100 hands, you can do anything. We make a lot of compost. I sometimes plant cover crop seed, not as much as I need to. Maintaining fertility. When the key thing for me about farming is it's not about the seed, just so. It's really about the soil. Really, farming is about feeding the soil. One handful of soil is 5 billion organisms. And it's those organisms that create the symbiotic relationship with the root systems that process and transfer those nutrients into the plant. And so it's not about inputs, it's about how do we feed the soil? And because soil's everything. I remember this old Iowa friend of mine talking about one year when all the barges were stuck on the Mississippi River. And he said, the river's not low. Half of Iowa's in the river. So how do we take care of soil? How do we take care of water? Water becoming an increasingly scarce resource in so many prime agricultural places. Soil itself is as much easier for the Cook family to farm housing developments on that prime pineapple and cane land than it is to farm food crops for Hawaii. There's no reason why Hawaii can't produce 80% of its own fruits and vegetables, really. Other than the tastes of the market. But from a sustainability standpoint, people should be growing food crops, not feed crops. And that's an awareness that's got to come, but really it comes to feeding the soil more than anything.
Have you looked into biochar at all?
Biochar is a really interesting thing that I haven't done. I've got some tanks that I want to do microbial mixes and fermentation composting with. Korean farming is really interesting to me. I have to admit that my actual farming, I'm not really a farmer. I've been on farms for 20 years, but I was not really, I'm a master gardener and a horticulturalist, but I'm not really a farmer. I got into the business world and blah, 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 blah. But there's so many ways to do it. And we're always constrained by what's in front of us and how complex we make our own presence. And go ahead.
Just what are your inputs to the soil?
Well, we're primarily doing cover cropping and making compost. I make compost with weeds and green manure and leaves. I grow Milo trees, and we grow other leaf plants that we can process those leaves into compost. I collect horse manure from a farm that is a rescue horse place, so it's not full of weed seed. I do collect chicken manure, but I don't put it directly in the field. I compost it first. I inoculate it with microorganisms when I make the compost. I do a little bit of mineral fertilizers. I'm trying to minimize it, but Hawaii is pretty short on some very basic phosphorus, potassium, calcium.
Are there any mushroom
Elizabeth?
growers on the Oahu?
There are. Mushrooms are another big thing on my list.
If there are, my mom used to use what's called mushroom manure.
Oh yeah,
because
mushroom compost is awesome.
mushroom growers were using the chicken manure, and by the time they'd grown the mushrooms in it, long enough, she'd buy it by the truckload, and it was wonderful manure.
Oh, it's awesome. There aren't many commercial mushroom operations in Oahu, and you got to be careful with them because some of them are pretty chemical intensive.
I'm just going to interject one moment. I'm so sorry. I know that we have such an interest on the biological sense, but I just want to get back to the theme of the year.
Back to the wisdom.
So I'm going to put Mary on the spot. I know that you've really contributed to the upbringings of not only your own children, but other children in your community. Can you tell us a little bit about the nurturing aspect that you've given? Because you've really churned out some amazing people, I'm telling you.
Oh, I have to disagree, but thank you. Because I think it's similar to what Peter has said. You have the plants, you have the soil, you put the seed rather into the soil, and what comes up may not be what you planted. But number one that he says is with love. Do everything with love, and whatever comes up, you accept them and just continue to love them. And one of the sayings for Saturday are the readings about how we may plant the tree, we may plant the seed, but we may not we may not reap the harvest, which is so true. And you don't become somebody who is going to say, well, it's not going to come up the way I want it, so I'm not going to do it. we will go ahead, we will try, and that's thank you. One of the things that caught my ear was when Peter said nature is chaos thriving. I love that because yeah, we that's like your kids, you know, you put them on the path, you try to guide them, and then they go off and do something else. And that's the chaos, but they're growing, they're maturing, they're learning. And I think that's the most important thing too, is
I also like to, I like to remind people too, back to ecological principles, is that really, the middle of the ocean is kind of a desert. The middle of the prairie is kind of a desert. It's pretty stable in the middle of the forest. Where you really find the richness of life is on the edges, where things are in transition all the time. That's where things are so much more dense and so much more diverse and so much more thriving in activity. And that in our human minds, in our souls, in our maturation of life, is we should always be, not always, but we should always be ready to be on those edges. Those edges are where the richness lay, where the challenges lay, where we suddenly have to bear ourselves in honesty and vulnerability to recognize, wow, life is not what I think it is. And so what do you have to show me today, this moment? It is the edge, the edges of life are the richness and the risk.
And I think too that if anybody here that maybe grows a garden, doesn't it taste so much better, that tomato that you planted yourself, rather than going to the grocery store? And just, I think that we have that ability to savor it a little bit more, because we know the amount of work and the care that took to get everything going. And I think that doesn't even just pertain to plants, it pertains to parenting or guardianship or anything like that. I feel that there is a girl that I know that does work with Big Brother, Big Sister, and she really has some amazing stories, because these children, like Mary was saying, you never know what may come up out of the soil once you plant something. Well, it's the same with children. She deals with a lot of children that have emotional or behavioral issues, and just being introduced to that type of lifestyle was really an eye-opener for her, to know that, okay, not everybody comes from the suburbs where there's an abundance of resources, education, things like that. She's really dealing with some inner city troubled youth that might not have the caregivers or parents to kind of mold them and nurture them in a fashion that is going to put them on their best foot forward for the future. So I think that, as you said, don't wait. Start the planning today, start the watering today, so that you can begin that future crop and, love that you have for everything. I'm not sure if anybody else wanted.
I'd like to just reiterate too, I think that's so important for all of us. And I know that we probably all know it and think about it, but that we all take that extra effort every day to plant those seeds in the young people around us. Find those people who are troubled or lost or wanting to, these kids who come to the farm, they're thirsty for something. They're not even sure what they're looking for. And so we've got to plant those seeds in the youth. We got to plant the seeds, and it's a pretty trouble. My son was a full-on drunk when he was 25. He didn't believe in himself. He didn't believe in the world. He didn't believe there was any hope in the world, and he just didn't care. And something clicked in his mind, and it changed everything. Thank God. Sorry, but
Yeah.
the youth needs help. The generations coming up need our help. Any of us who have a heart, half a heart, an interest in a heart, interest in love, interest in making the world a better place, we have to share it. we have to go out of our way to share it every day. Make that effort, because our future as a planet, as we want it to be, diverse and beautiful and thriving, depends on it. It really does. There is no time better than now.
Oh, that's very beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I just had, before I go over to David, I just had one quick question. I didn't know anything about Dr. Shiva before I read about her. And I just was wondering if either you or Elizabeth heard about the start of kind of her contemporary ecological movement with, I believe, Chipko in the 1970s. And it really brought about that word tree hugger. So do one of you want to just quick mention that story? Peter?
I'll defer to Elizabeth. I think she knows much more about it than I do.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's what got Vandana started because they were cutting down the forests in her part of India. She was actually a PhD physicist by training, but she cared a great deal about her area and what was happening. And she worked with a bunch of women who literally tied themselves to the trees to prevent the chainsaws from cutting them down. And it became known as the Chipko movement. And that's what got her started, you know, because this was part of Green Revolution tactics, I believe, was to raise the forests and then, you know, do monoculture agriculture with these artificial fertilizer inputs. So that's got her started, and she's been cooking ever since. She then researched the entire Green Revolution to see how bad it was, and it's about our future. It's about our future society and how we're going to feed ourselves, isn't it? That's what we're talking about here, all of us. And I think we're going to have to go back to as much local agriculture as possible all around the world. Still to this day, most of the food actually eaten in the world, I think, comes from local farming. And the output, there's a huge amount of waste in the big agricultural system. You know, they may produce a lot of stuff, but it doesn't hold up, it rots or whatever, you know, it gets tossed, and the shipping it around the world is way too expensive. So we have to go, the closer to home you can get your food supply, the better. And we know that Hawaii was self-sufficient when the Europeans first came here, and the Americans and missionaries and all those guys. And everything was produced here on the island. There was nothing lacking in the diet. And it wouldn't be that hard to do it again, but it's about our governance, our will to be sustainable. We're not paying nearly enough attention to climate change. And in terms of this meeting today, in terms of our local food supply, we need a local healthy food supply again. And everything that we can do to that end is really, really, really vital. We could actually lose our airports and piers at the same time with one tsunami here. And that could happen because of a volcanic explosion as well as by sudden sea level rise. Sea level will not go up gradually an inch at a time. It's going to happen a couple meters at a time. And no one is prepared for it. No one wants to deal with that reality, but that's how nature works. She doesn't do nice human incremental slow curves. Suddenly a new species appears in the evolutionary trajectory, and you know, this is how it works. So whatever we can do, whether it's green walls or roof gardening in the city, or you know, anything to keep more local food growing here is so important. There's a whole movie, what, Poison in Paradise? Is that the one with the subtitle M&Ms and ketchup and M&Ms? How many of you seen that movie? Oh, everybody who has any interest in food in Hawaii should see it. It's around, it's available. And what it says is that we could be reduced to ketchup and M&Ms after a couple of days of no imports, right?
Yeah.
So I've been passionate about breadfruit, and I'd love to talk to Peter about all the issues there, because there's a whole new big movement of huge greenhouses that are going to all the less developed countries of the world, trying to convince them that that is the way for them to improve their agriculture. And it's hit breadfruit big time. They're trying to monoculture breadfruit when it should not be monocultured.
Right.
So many issues, but I don't want to hog this
Yeah.
conversation.
Oh,
Well,
you know,
there's a lot about that. I mean, just planting trees on the farm. You know, when we started the farm, it was a abandoned farm. And Cliff, bless his heart, had a bulldoze flat, and all we had was a big 5-acre piece of bare dirt for the most part when we started. And now that we have these mature trees, it only takes 11 years here, and we have these amazing trees on the farm. We're 10 degrees cooler than anywhere else in Waianae. It's amazing, you know. It's amazing what shade can do to, you know, shade and mulch can do to improve plant and tree health. You know, just mulch by itself. If you mulch a tree or you mulch your seeds, you lower the temperature of the soil enough that it dramatically improves the performance and livability of the plant or the tree.
I'm just going to jump in real quick. I know we have to be mindful of the time. Of course, we always invite people to stay after. But David, I'll let you take it over. And then if you also can just give a vote of thanks for Peter's time and everybody's here time.
You know it. Yeah. Peter, as you were talking about your son eventually kind of coming around, and I was thinking about Mary when she disagreed with the fact that she had produced good children. I wondered if Malia might hear that. But anyway, to bring it back to this quote on Tuesday that reminded me, and there's a special word in there I wanted to underline, but the quote is, the seed of self-esteem so eagerly planted in youngsters in school will eventually bloom and ripen into the genuine fruit of humility.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So I was thinking, yeah, I've seen that time and time again where they go off and they become, you know, what doesn't seem like what you had in mind for them, but eventually we all come around. And so I wanted to also just thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to bring us this presentation and to share your wisdom and your love with us. I know we could go on for days, and as Kevin had mentioned, anyone is welcome to stay on past this so we can make some more of those connections about books and whatnot. So Peter, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to think and speak. And I can stick around a little bit if anybody wants.
Yes, please feel free. Before everybody goes, I just really quickly wanted to make mention. Did I just disappear? No? Okay. I just wanted to make mention of some of the upcoming topics for the next 2 weeks at least. Next Saturday, we're really thrilled to welcome back Maurice Bishop, who will speak on harmonious relationship builders, on Mikhail Gorbachev from the tradition of global leadership. And then after that, we have Being Just, Fair, Pono. And we're still looking for a speaker for that, but I'm sure Renee will have a little bit more information when she's back this week. But Peter, thank you again. And of course, anybody that wants to stay on, you're more than welcome. Otherwise, I hope the rest of you have a beautiful weekend.
And I'll always reiterate that all of you are welcome on the farm anytime.
Awesome.
Where can we get more information on the farm, Peter? I wasn't able to Google it. I got just a big
Yeah, we're pretty lame in our social media, I have to admit. I hate Facebook. I don't do web pages.
So
I'm
where
lucky
are
to
you?
get on a Zoom meeting.
Give us an address or an email or contact.
Mauna Farm, Mouna, which, if you might already know is inner silence in Sanskrit. And so a lot of people mistake it for Mauna Farm, mountain in Hawaiian, but we actually think they have the same root. It's in Waianae. It's on Waianae Valley Road, 85-485A, Waianae Valley Road. Yeah.
Hello.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. We hope to see you next week. Thank you,
All right.
Peter. Take care.
Yeah.
Okay.